4 in the morning at the yard on Halsted, cold enough that the door handles bit through a pair of gloves. 40 men lined up under the sodium lights, breath going up in clouds, waiting on the pre-trip and the route sheet. The first 2 hours belonged to the commercial alleys behind the restaurants downtown, where nobody complained much about a hydraulic packer before daylight. The houses came later, after 6:30, once the noise ordinance stopped being their problem. Wes was 28 that winter. 4 years on the back of a truck, $9,000 deep in credit card debt, and not somebody you'd want in your passenger seat for 10 hours. He didn't run that balance up on anything big enough to remember. That was the part that made him sick when the statement came. Gas station food after a bad shift. 2 coffees when one would have done it. A sandwich he ate in the car, because going home empty-handed made the whole morning feel like it had taken something from him and given nothing back. $10 here, 16 there, never enough to scare him in the moment, always enough to follow him home. 10-hour shifts, sometimes 11. 400-500 grabs before lunch if you counted every bag, bin, and soaked box. A man finds out things about a city on that job. There was a house on Delmar that put out 9 handles of vodka in a single month, and Wes watched the for sale sign go up that fall. 2 blocks over, it was formula cans and wipes, so somebody there wasn't sleeping either. The people who ordered half their life online just stacked the soaked cardboard next to the bin and let the crew figure it out. What got under his skin was never the smell, it was the looking through. A guy in a bathrobe would come out for his paper, and his eyes would slide right past Wes's face, like he was part of the container. One morning, a woman walked around him on her own driveway without a word, the way you step around a puddle, and he stood there, holding her bag with his jaw locked up so tight it ached into his ear. So, he swore, at the traffic, at the bins nobody bothered to roll down, at the pickup that laid on the horn because the rig needed 9 extra seconds at a stop sign. He carried all of it around in his back pocket, and nobody paid him a nickel extra for it. His driver was a man named Amos, 55 years old, 22 of them behind that wheel, big square hands, reading glasses tucked up in the visor, a steel thermos he handled like it had been in the family since the Depression. 8 months Wes had been on his truck, and he had never once heard the man swear. Somebody would cut across their nose on Bellamy, and Amos would just ease off the pedal and let them in. A guy would lean on the horn behind them, and Amos would lift 2 fingers off the wheel in a small wave, almost friendly. It drove Wes up the wall. He decided the job had ground the old man down so long he'd forgotten there was another setting. Wes was 28. When you're that age and broke, a guy who doesn't get angry just looks like a guy who gave up. It came apart on a Thursday in the middle of March. 8 straight days above 50, the snowbanks down to gray lumps, the whole city starting to smell again. They were up in the Highlands, the part of town with the stone mailboxes and the lawn crews. Somebody had put out a bag they hadn't bothered to tie, just twisted the top and hoped. Whatever was in it had been frozen for a week and had spent 3 warm days coming back to life. Wes got his hand under it wrong. The seam let go, and about a week of a family's kitchen went out across a driveway that probably cost more than Wes's car. Grease water was already running for the storm drain, and there was a chicken carcass in the middle of it with the wrap still half on. He lost it. He kicked the bin hard enough to send it scraping sideways, the plastic cracking against the edge of the garage trim. Not hard enough to break anything, hard enough that the sound came back ugly. He said things about that homeowner and the people who raised him that don't bear repeating. His voice came right back off the brick and hit him in the face, and every window in that house stayed dark. Amos put the truck in neutral, set the brake, climbed down, and pulled the push broom and the flat shovel off the clips on the side of the rig. He swept the driveway. 4 minutes, maybe 5. He got down on one knee at the end to work the last of it out of the expansion joint, because grease sets up in concrete and the man knew it. Then he stowed the tools, climbed back in the cab, and waited for Wes to get on the step. He didn't bring it up. Amos kept his mouth shut the entire drive to the next house. He didn't say a word while pumping gas either, and by 10 o'clock, Wes would have paid him to yell about it. They ran another 40 stops before break. Around 10, they pulled onto the shoulder on Gorham, outside the laundromat with the busted neon, and Amos shut it down. Wes hadn't touched his food. He sat on the bumper with his hands hanging between his knees and finally just said it. "Why aren't you mad?" Amos looked over. "About what?" "About any of it. They act like we're not people. This job is garbage, Amos. Actual garbage." The old man took his time. He folded the wax paper off his sandwich into a square first, the way he always did, and Wes sat there listening to a dryer thump around inside the laundromat. Then Amos walked to the curb, picked up the first bag of the next stop, came back, and set it in Wes's arms. "Hold that." Wes held it. "Okay." "Heavy?" "Amos, I've thrown 400 of these since 5 o'clock. "Right." He nodded slowly. "So it's nothing to you. 3 seconds from the curb to the hopper, and it's out of your hands for good." He tapped the plastic. "That driveway this morning. How long did it take me to sweep?" 5 minutes. "And how long have you been carrying it?" Wes said, about half a word, and then quit. "You'll take that mess home," Amos said. "It'll sit down at your kitchen table with you tonight. You'll tell somebody about it, whoever answers the phone. Then around midnight, you'll run it back one more time and think of the perfect thing you should have shouted at a house where everybody was asleep." He shrugged, and his jacket made that stiff canvas sound. "Call it 18 hours on that one bag, and you're asking yourself why you're tired." Wes had 6 things to say back, and not one of them would hold. "I throw the bag in the truck," Amos said. "You throw the bag in the truck, and then you keep the smell." He took it back out of Wes's arms and swung it into the hopper. Easy, like it weighed nothing, which it did. "I see all of it, son. Same as you. I just don't take it with me." 3 weeks later, they had a bad one in the service alley off Kestrel. That alley is 1 lane wide with a brick wall down one side, and it runs through to 4th at the far end, so you go in nose first and you come out the other side. There's no turning around in there, and no backing out with any dignity. They were about 2/3 of the way down it when the tailgate cylinder hung up mid-cycle. Gate sitting half open, Packer stopped where it was, load not seated. You don't roll a rear loader down a public alley in that condition, so they didn't. Amos set the brake, got out, and started working it off the side panel. Give it a cycle, give it another one. 5 minutes, give or take. Long enough for the black sedan that had turned in behind them to have nowhere on this earth to go. The man in it put it in park, got out, and told them in detail what he thought of them, of their line of work, of how far they'd gotten in school, of where they'd be in 10 years. He used the word trash about 6 different ways. Creative guy. Amos never took his eyes off the panel. Wes saw his jaw move once, like he was biting down on the first answer that came to him. Then the old man let it pass. Ran the cycle one more time, and the gate came down where it belonged. Then he climbed up, released the brake, and took them out the 4th Street end. Wes was still spitting nails at lunch. They'd parked in the gravel lot beside Renner Park. First week of April, the lake finally open at the edges, with a gray plate of ice still floating out in the middle. It had rained in the night, and there was still an inch of it standing in the lip of the front bumper. Amos walked over to the edge of the lot and picked up a squashed paper coffee cup somebody had tossed in the weeds. He popped it back into shape with his thumb, leaned over the bumper, and dipped it in that standing rainwater. Half a cup, clear enough that you could see the bottom of it. Then he set it on the hood, walked 4 steps to the berm at the edge of the lot, and scooped up a pinch of the sand and grit the city had thrown down all winter. There was a ridge of it along every curb in Ashford by April. He dropped it in. The water went brown on contact, grit turning slow circles at the bottom. "Watch," he said. He walked down the bank to the water and took up another pinch. Same hand, same amount. Wes was paying attention by then, because he knew the old man was doing something to him. Amos threw it out over the open water. It hit, and there was nothing. No mark on the surface at all. A goose came down somewhere off to the left, and the ripples off that were bigger than anything the grit had done. Amos came back up the bank with his hands in his jacket pockets. "Same grit," he said. "Same hand, same amount. Nothing happened to it on the way down." He looked at the paper cup, then out at the lake. Different place to land. He picked the paper cup off the hood and casually tossed it into the back of the hopper. "That man this morning was a pinch of somebody else's bad day," Amos said. "Most days, Wes, you're making yourself the cup." Wes didn't have an answer for him. But 2 days later, the sedan came back up in his head at a red light on Delmar, and he sat there, waiting on the green, and couldn't work up anything about it. The man had stopped being a villain somewhere along the way and turned into some guy in a car. The rain lesson came in May. The rain flooded the streets. By the time we reached the boxes, they were just soggy cardboard sticking to the concrete. Everybody in the fleet was behind that morning. A white pickup came around the corner too fast and pulled up nose to nose with the rig. Trent, the route supervisor, 34, headset in one ear, clipboard he never actually wrote on. His hand was shaking on the phone, bad enough that Wes could see it from the cab, and his voice kept jumping up into a register that didn't belong to him. 2 rigs were down in the shop with hydraulic trouble, and their work had been carved up across the rest of the fleet since Monday. The telematics had this truck 2 hours off pace, and dispatch could watch the dot crawl in real time. The east half of the Highlands had gone unserviced the day before and was now going to miss twice in a row, in the rain, with a holiday weekend sitting behind it. The complaint line had been ringing since 6. Trent stood out in it, shouting into the phone at somebody who clearly had him on speaker while doing something else, then turning and shouting at the windshield, then back into the phone. At one point he yelled, "I cannot have this today. Not today." He wasn't angry. Anybody who's been broke and behind on something knows that sound. He had a number he was going to be judged by on Friday. No way to move it. Trent stood out in the downpour, yelling into his phone, completely frantic because he couldn't control the weather. Amos rolled the window down. He didn't raise his voice. He waited for Trent to run out of air, which took a while. Then he pointed at the glass in front of him. "Trent, can you get somebody on the phone and make that stop?" Trent stared at him. "Make what stop?" "The rain." "Are you out of your mind?" "No." Amos reached over and flicked the stalk. The blades swept once, twice, and the street came clear. The bins, the flooded drain at the corner, the woman 2 houses down watching from her porch. "Then quit trying," Amos said. "Weather doesn't answer to you. Neither does the lady on Kestrel who calls in every single week." He tapped the windshield with one knuckle. "Keeping this clear, so you can see the next 100 feet, that part answers to you. It's about the only part that does." Trent stood there with the rain coming off the end of his nose and didn't say anything. "Run your route," Amos said, quieter. Do it right. Just stop asking the morning to follow your schedule. It never agreed to it. The years piled up the way they do when you're just looking at the calendar, waiting for payday. He said, "Yeah," one word. Then he got back in the pickup and went to his next crew. He was still a pain about the numbers after that, because that was the job. He still called more than anybody wanted him to. But he stopped calling before the first hour was even done. He stopped asking the cab to explain a whole morning, while the morning was still happening. In August, when 2 trucks were down again and everybody was behind by breakfast, he showed up at a stop with 2 coffees and stood there drinking his without saying much. That was it. That was the whole thing, spread out over a summer, and if you blinked, you'd have missed all of it. Wes sat in that cab with the rain going off the roof like somebody pouring gravel on it, and his ears got hot. 4 years he'd blamed the work for how small his life felt. Nobody had ever taken anything off him. He'd been handing it over at every intersection in the city, to men whose faces he couldn't even remember by lunch. Years went by in the ordinary way, which is to say, Wes didn't notice most of them while they were happening. He switched routes over the years and worked with new crews. He still got frustrated some mornings, but he learned to stop dwelling on it. Wes didn't magically turn into some Zen master. He still yelled at traffic and let bad stops get under his skin. He still said the wrong thing some days. Still carried a stop longer than he needed to. But more and more, he caught himself before the thing climbed into the cab with him. Amos drove another 9 years, and then his heart went on a Sunday afternoon in his own kitchen with the ball game on the radio. He was 64. He wasn't rich. He left a small house he'd finished paying off in his 50s, a pickup older than the rig he drove at work, and some savings bonds for a granddaughter in Tulsa. Ruiz read the notice out at the yard a couple of weeks later, and it was about 4 lines long. Vollmer's chapel seats about 40. They put out every folding chair in the back closet, and people still ended up standing along the wall and out into the hallway by the coat rack. 14 guys from the yard came, some off shift, some having traded a day to be there. Ruiz, the mechanic, 19 years of knowing him, got up to read something he'd written on the back of a work order and had to stop halfway and sit down. Wes stood at the back by the coat rack and counted the room. 19 people in there he had never met in his life. Neighbors, a woman from the credit union, 2 guys who said Amos taught them to drive. Every one of them got something off that man, and none of it was money. Out in the lot, 3 drivers had parked their own cars in a row with the hazards going. Nobody organized that. The $9,400 took Wes 3 years and change, not because COM paid the bills by itself. It didn't. It just stopped making him buy something every morning to prove the day hadn't beaten him. No second coffee he didn't want. No sandwich eaten in the car because he was too angry to go home yet. No little charge on the card that felt like nothing until the statement came. The work still paid what it paid. The route was still the route, but for the first time in years, Wes stopped letting a bad morning spend his money after the truck was already parked. It's 4 in the morning again. Same lot, same lights, and that Packer still comes down with a noise that used to go straight through him. Doesn't anymore. He couldn't tell you exactly when that stopped. He's in the driver's seat now. Has been a while. His hair is going at the temples, and his knee makes a noise on the 3rd step up into the cab that the guys have started imitating. There's a kid on the back today. 22. Quick hands. A mouth like a busted faucet. This morning he lost one against the curb on Bellamy, and the whole thing went out across the sidewalk, and Wes heard him through the glass. All of it. The arms going, the kick at the bin, the yelling at a house where everyone was asleep. He watched him a second in the mirror. Then he put it in neutral, set the brake, climbed down, pulled the broom and the flat shovel off the clips, and swept the sidewalk clean. Got down on one knee at the end to work the last of it out of the joint in the concrete, because grease sets up, and the old man taught him that. He didn't say anything to the kid. Got back in, released the brake, ran the next stop. The kid will ask him sooner or later. He's got a whole curb full of bags waiting on him, and he doesn't know it yet. Over 30 years, Amos swept up after other people, and he never took one bit of it home with him. Wes has the broom now. Wes finishes sweeping up the spill. Sometimes, the physical act of cleaning the concrete is the only thing keeping him from bringing the mess home, and the kid on the back doesn't know any of that yet. He just knows the old driver didn't yell when he could have. He doesn't know there is a whole curb full of bags waiting on him. The kid thinks the hardest part of the shift is the lifting. He has no idea what the real weight is yet. But he will.